Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're seeing me. This is, I want to say it's probably about day 34. I have lost count, I don't know about you, in the Pajama Gramma Expert Secrets Coaching Mastermind. Today we are starting secret number 9 out of the Expert Secrets book by Russell Brunson. Secret number 9 is all about false belief patterns. And this was actually a really eye-opening and enlightening thing to learn for me personally. I don't know if it will be for you, but to me, I've always known and studied limiting and false beliefs, but I've never had it presented in this particular way, which I find extremely powerful because it's so basic to understanding false beliefs and then how to change those false beliefs. It's a very powerful concept that we're going to use throughout the rest of the book and throughout what we do. Kind of like status. There's certain themes that run through the entire book, that run through the entire way that we interact with other human beings. So today's is just a summary about false beliefs. It goes from page 128 to 133. So if you haven't read that, grab your book or listen to it on the audio version and just spend a few minutes, it just takes a couple minutes to read these pages and understand the concepts in them. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to create a couple of worksheets and exercises for you because this is a really powerful thing to have in your back pocket. The ability to tell stories in the Epiphany Bridge way, which is what this is an extension of, is the way to share and convince people to participate in your new opportunity. So false belief patterns, what the heck are they? Where do they come from? Why do we have them? Does everyone have them? Yes, everyone has them. Everybody has false beliefs. Everybody has doubts, fears, worries, and insecurities, especially the people that we're going to help and serve. Just think back. When you first decided to study your area of expertise, why did you start studying it? Probably because you had some kind of a belief that you were trying to overcome about the way your life was or the way your life should be. So, false belief patterns, they follow a very specific pattern. First, we have the belief. We have this chain, and I like the way he calls it chains of false belief because false beliefs are like chains. They hold us back from being who we really are. They hold us back from creating what it is that we're really here to create in our lives, for sure, and in the world as a whole, and in our families and in our communities. They hold us back from doing what it is that we're really meant to be doing and what we're here to create. So we get this belief, and this belief, and we'll talk about where they come from, and I'll give you an example of one that I just had a really aha moment from my life that I never even realized that this false belief was still acting on me, and that it went all the way back to first grade, and something that happened in first grade. And I'll share that false belief and the chain it's had on me and how I've gone about changing that. And it's interesting that since I just realized it, it's not in my inventory of false beliefs. It's not in my stories inventory. It's one that just popped into my head today. So that tells you how many of those we actually have in our own lives that we might not consciously be aware of. And then when we start thinking about it and working on it, we're like, oh yeah, I have an example of that. This is how this happened and played out in my life experience, and how and what I did about it, and how I can use that story to help other people have the same type of realization that they don't have to let that false belief act upon them in their life any further. So we got this belief. We might not consciously know where it came from, but we got it because we had an experience. Some experience in our life, my experience in first grade, caused me to have a belief not because the experience was any one thing, not because it was good or bad, but because of the story that I created in my mind about this experience. That is really incredible and shows how powerful we human beings are. We have an experience and we create a whole story about it, of what that experience means to us, and then that affects us for the rest of our freaking life. Now, I'm sitting here looking at my daughter's beautiful dog, Bean, and I think about a dog. Dogs have experiences all day long. They don't decide if they're good or bad. They don't judge whether it's good or bad. They don't tell themselves a story about that experience and then have it affect them the rest of their life. They just be themselves and do their dog thing and go about their life, and whatever happens, they just deal with it at the moment, and then it's dealt with, it's done. They don't sit and think about it or ponder it or worry about it for the next 40 years like human beings do. And so this is an incredibly powerful way to help us help people get over the stuff that is lies that they've told themselves as stories throughout their lifetime, so that they can participate in our new opportunity and we can help them change their lives. Because that's what this is all about, is transforming people like we've been transformed to be more, have more, or do more than they ever thought possible. So we do that by giving them a new epiphany bridge, a new story that they can tell themselves to replace the old story that they told themselves in the first place that was a lie, that was false, that led to the false belief. Because our beliefs are just thoughts that we have over and over and over again, or something that we encounter when we have a strong experience or when we have an experience, and it's the story we tell ourselves about that experience. It's about the meaning that we give to that experience. And depending on when we form that story, when we make up that story, depending on where we're at in our life, that story can really mess us up. And that story is usually a lie, because things that happen to us, experiences we have, they really aren't good or bad. It's just how we interpret that story, the story we tell, the story we create, the thoughts we think, the feelings we feel, and what we tell ourselves that they mean. Now, the scary thing is, a lot of this happens to us at a subconscious level. We're not even aware we're doing it, because we're having, millions of experiences every day, right? So things are happening to us and around us and through us all the time. And most of them are at a subconscious level. Most of them we don't even know it's happening. So maybe somebody said something mean to you in high school, and that's impacted your entire life. I'll give you an example here for me. When I was in high school, one of my best friends was a guy, and every day he told me I was fat and ugly. Every frickin' day, that was his joke. And I know now that he did it in a funny way, because he loved me too and liked me, and we liked each other. We were best, almost best friends. But he told me I was fat and ugly every freaking day in high school. So how do you think I felt and thought about myself? I always thought I was fat and ugly. And that has affected me like my entire freaking life. And I actually had to go back and think about that and change the way I thought about that, because I'm not skinny, but I'm not like super fat, and I'm not great looking, but I'm not super ugly either. I mean, on the spectrum of fat and ugly, I'm probably, closer to the middle, or, I'm not really heinous and I'm not really obese. So why would I believe that about myself? And that actually led to decades of yo-yo dieting and not taking care of myself and doing things that weren't healthy. All because one person said I was fat and ugly. And then when one person said that, I looked around the world and told myself a story. Well, if he said that, it must be true because he's my friend. And then I would look for evidence of that being true throughout my life. And mostly not at a conscious level. It was mostly going on in my subconscious, and I never even realized it until I analyzed that belief and said, well, is that really true? How does that make me feel when I say I'm fat and ugly? Well, it makes my tummy hurt. It makes my head hurt. Well, if it makes my tummy hurt and it makes my head hurt, it's because it's a lie. It's because it's not true. And so why would I tell myself a story to believe that my entire life? Because that's what human beings do. Only human beings do that. Only with our magnificent minds and brains can create such incredibly bad things or amazingly good things in our life. But we have to do that at a conscious level. We have to consciously create those things, and we have to figure out what are the unconscious things for ourselves and for other people that are holding them back. And the real trick of this is, as you're trying to think about what your ideal customer, your target audience's false beliefs are, if you're having a hard time brainstorming those, and I'll give you a couple ideas here in a minute, because there's some that they're the same for all human beings. But if you're having a hard time with that, just go back in time. Put yourself back in the spot of where you were when you first decided that you needed a change. You needed to do something different. Where were you? What were you thinking? What were you feeling? What realizations and aha moments and epiphanies did you have that caused you to question the false belief that you had? And what was that false belief? And then what was the story? What was the experience you had? And what was the story you were telling yourself that caused you to believe that false belief? Kissing a fool, itching my nose, drinking some coffee. Mainly so I can take a breath, right? So, experience, story, experience that we have, the story we tell ourselves about that experience, that's what creates the false belief. And so, once we know what people's false beliefs are, we can find the stories that have helped us to get over that false belief in the past and create an epiphany bridge, like in secret number 6, like in using the script in secret number 8, the one we just got done with. We can create little mini epiphany bridges to help people break their false beliefs. It's a pretty easy process. But one of the cool things that Russell discovered and is helping us to learn is that stories are the key to breaking false beliefs. Stories are the key to doing this. And it's a pretty simple, again, I said it's a pretty simple process. I'm repeating myself today. First, we want to make a list of the false beliefs that we think our potential clients might have or might come up with. Whenever people are presented with a new opportunity, the first thing that starts going on in their mind from their subconscious and their conscious is they start not blurting out, but in their head, they start going through all the reasons this isn't going to work, why this isn't for them, why they don't deserve it, why they're not good enough. But a whole ton of them, like thousands in an instant of false beliefs people can come up with to not see your vehicle, to not experience or even be open-minded enough to think about your vehicle. So some common false beliefs across the board are, I can't, I don't know. I don't know is amazing to me. My 2-year-old granddaughter, I don't see her a ton, but she was with us about a month or so ago, and she kept saying, I don't know. I don't know how. I don't know what I want. I don't know what I like. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. And it was really shocking to me that at such a young age, we are convinced by whatever experience she's had in her little life so far that she doesn't know. And I'm like, how do you not know what you like? You know what you like. You get to decide what you like. But at such a young age, we are indoctrinated and inundated with information telling us that we're not smart enough to make that decision. We don't know. We're just a baby. We're just little. We don't know. We're just little. Or whatever it is, we incorporate the I don't know. So I don't know runs rampant through a lot of people's lives. Or I don't know how. I'm too blank. I'm too old. I'm too fat. I'm too young. I'm too skinny. I don't have a college degree. Whatever form that takes, that is a very common false belief. I'm not blank. Usually some form of I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not fast enough. I'm not emotional enough. I'm not ready. Whatever form that takes. And then there's the whole slew of the poor me beliefs, the victim mentality beliefs, the world is out to get me, that's just reality. My ex-husband always would throw reality in my face. And I'm like, well, that's your reality. It doesn't mean it has to be mine, which is probably part of the reason we're divorced, is because he didn't like that I didn't adopt his reality, because he, of course, believed that his reality is the only reality on the planet, like most people believe. And here's the rub. He's right. And I was right too, because each of us get to create our own reality. We each get to create our own world. We each get to create and experience the world that we want. So he was right. It was reality for him, but he didn't like when I would say, yep, that's your reality. It's not mine. I get to create my own too. Or things like, that's the way the world works. That's just the way it is. That's the way we've always done it. That was one of my most hated phrases in corporate America was, and even still working with clients, if somebody tells me, well, that's the way we've always done it and that's the way we're going to continue to do it, I say, bye, I'm not going to work with you, because that tells me how closed-minded you are, and that if there's certain things that you're doing just because you've always done it that way and you're not even open to continuous improvement or looking at it another way, I can't help you, because I am all about There's always a better, faster, easier way to do absolutely everything in the universe. We just might not have discovered or figured it out or been open-minded enough to see it yet. So step 2 is asking yourself, what is the most likely experience that my prospect had that caused them to believe this belief? And I'm going to give my example at the end of discussing the questions. But like I said, I had a real aha moment going through this today again. So what is the most likely experience? So if somebody's saying, I don't know, what is the most likely experience that my 2-year-old granddaughter has had that is causing her to already say, I don't know what I like? Well, it's probably that people have told her she doesn't know because she's just a baby. Oh, you don't know how to do that because you're just a baby. You don't know how to do that because you're just 2. You don't know how to do that because da-da-da-da-da. You don't know how to do that because you haven't seen it yet. I will do it for you. It's a lot of that too. Mom or grandma's guilty of this, or dad or anybody will just do it for them. They'll read books to them because they don't know how to read yet. They'll give them the answer or help them with a puzzle because they don't know how to do it yet. And that reinforces the whole I don't know. So make a list of what those experiences, the most likely experiences were for your client that would reinforce that belief or that might have caused that false belief. And then step 3 is to, what is the story that they created based on that experience that caused them to believe the false belief? So let's use the granddaughter. I don't know. Everybody's doing things for her, everything for her, so that, and telling her by doing everything for her that she doesn't know. And the story she's telling herself in her little 2-year-old mind is, I'm too little to do that. I'm too little to know that. I don't know how to do that. I don't know the answer. So the story is, if I'm not fast enough and if people are having to do it for me all the time, they're telling me I don't know how to do that yet because I'm little. That is why I don't know how to do it. And then step 4 is to find an epiphany bridge story. Find a story, preferably from your past, because those are the most powerful, because you have the most firsthand experience with it. And you can use other people's stories, and you should. And you can use stories in the news and things, but I think the more removed a story is from you personally, the less powerful it is. I don't know if Russell would agree with this or not. This is my opinion. But I have found that when I'm sharing stories, if I'm sharing a story that's actually happened to me, it is way more powerful and way more impactful and way more helpful to other people, the person I'm talking to, than if I'm just telling someone else's story. And it's way less powerful than if I'm sharing something that I heard about in the news or I'm sharing something that I read about in a book. Those can be powerful examples, but they're never as powerful as how that's related to me changing my false belief. So if I hear a story in the news, or if I read a story and that has an impact on me, now I'm bringing it in to sharing it as my story and the impact it had on me and why it caused me to have an epiphany. That's way more powerful than just sharing someone else's story or sharing someone else's epiphany. So what is an epiphany bridge or an epiphany story that we can use to help them see that that belief is false and that they actually see that that belief is false? And then we replace their story with our story, and that allows them to let go of and be free of that false belief once and for all. So for example, with my granddaughter, I explained to her that yes, she may only be 2 and she may be little, but she's learning all the time, and that she's so smart and so amazing. Anything she wants to figure out and can possibly imagine, she can figure out and imagine. And I also reinforce for her that she does know. She knows what she likes. She gets to decide and choose what she likes and what she wants to know and what she's curious about and what she's capable of. Nobody else outside of her can tell her that. Now, do I know if a 2-year-old got that? I sure hope so, because every time I see her, I'm going to reinforce those positive beliefs and positive messages and the belief in herself and her ability to choose and decide and make decisions. Because my belief now is that one of the things that makes people struggle the most is their inability to decide and to know and to believe in themselves and to be themselves and to choose for themselves what is best for them. And nobody else can do that for them. Only you can decide what's best for you. Only you know what's best for you. Your mom doesn't know, your dad doesn't know, your sisters, your brothers, your friends, your spouses, your significant others. Nobody knows but you. Only you know what's going on inside of you. So now let me give you my example of going through this process. And the other thing we're going to do, after we do this for one, we are going to create a whole list of them. I would say think of 10 to 20, at least 10 false beliefs that your prospect or customer will have about your new opportunity, and brainstorm those out. And then we're going to do this. We're going to create we're going to think about the false beliefs, the 10 most common false beliefs. And again, some of those are the same for everybody. I'm not good enough. I can't. This isn't possible. This is a scam. This won't work for me. The same things come up all the time in different areas, which we're going to explore more in the next secrets. But the same type things come up all the time. But here, what we want to do is we just want to list out and brainstorm 10 for sure. But if you can get 20 or so, I think that will give you a better foundation. And yes, some of them will be a little repetitive and a little different way of wording them, but that's important too, because then if somebody says, I can't do that, or this won't work for me, although it's really the same, I can't do it and this won't work for me, if you use their own words and you have an example that's really, really close to a time that I thought this won't work for me, is different than a story of an experience of I can't. That's two really different things. Even though they sound like they're the same reason or the same false belief, they're actually slightly different. It's like thinking I'm not good enough and I don't deserve are the exact same thing. They're very similar, but they're not the exact same thing. So if you can have an epiphany bridge story for both of those things, it makes your ability to call on and pull out stories so much more powerful. So let me give you an example of an aha that so then we're going to have a list of the epiphany, or a list of the false beliefs, the experience that the person may or may not have had, but probably had that led to that belief, the story that they told themselves about that experience, and then our epiphany bridge story that we're going to use to counteract and knock that belief out of the park for the person. So the example I came up with today was, I guess it would be, and I thought it would be an I can't. It's either an I can't or an I'm not good enough story. And I remembered the experience that I had that reminded me of this was in first grade. I got put in the second reading group. Back when I was in grade school, number one, I had a first grade teacher who absolutely hated my guts. I don't know why, but she used to ridicule me, and she used to actually hit me with a ruler and yell at me and humiliate me in front of the class. So that might have something to do with it. But in first grade, I was put in the second reading group. We had the first reading group of all the super smart kids and the second reading group of all the other kids. So all of us that were slower or stupid, according to our teachers, were put in this second reading group. And I was actually really devastated by that because my older sister, of course, had been in the first reading group when she was in first grade. So I just figured I would be in the first reading group too, because I figured I was pretty much as smart as she was. Although, who knows? I mean, I think she's a genius, so she's probably way smarter than me. But I figured I was, smart enough to be in the first reading group. And I knew all the kids in the first reading group, and some of them were, I thought, at the time, dumber than me. Not that you're judging that, but as little kids, you think some are sharper than others. We just all judge all the time. So I got put in this second reading group, and I was really upset about it. I heard other kids talking about it, and of course, all the kids in the first reading group thought they were so awesome. Here's that status thing coming in, even in first grade. And, the rest of us, those of us in the second reading group, we kind of felt like dummies and like we weren't good enough to be in the first reading group. And that experience, I really didn't remember it until today. So it's kind of fascinating, the stuff that comes up the more often we do this, and actually how good it is for us. It's not just good for the people that we're working with, but it's really good for us and our emotional well-being and our humanness to actually do these exercises. So step 3 is to think about the false story that they might be telling themselves. So what was the false story I was telling myself about this? Well, I was telling myself I was slow and stupid and I wasn't as good as the other kids. So I was comparing myself to the kids in the first reading group. And I was thinking that, I wasn't as good as the other kids. And that is actually probably when I began comparing myself to others and thinking about what other people thought of me and how other people judged me and giving it any credibility. Up until then, I was a pretty tenacious, outgoing kid. I was the kid in the neighborhood that would, my mom always tells the story, I would, put my thumbs through my belt loops and I would say, are you friendly, as a toddler before I could hardly even talk. Anybody new that came along in the neighborhood, I was the first one to greet them and say, are you friendly? And if they were friendly, they could come play with all of us other kids. If they weren't, they had to go away and I would chase them away. So it was probably my earliest and first experience with actually not feeling good enough, thinking I couldn't do something, and comparing myself to others. So boy, how is that for a whole lot of crap stories I'm telling myself as a kid and creating all these false beliefs for myself. And the Epiphany Bridge story that I came up with as I was first thinking of this was between second and third grade. I was given a camera as a gift, and I'm trying to think who I got the camera from now. I can't even remember, but I was given this old-fashioned camera. And it was one of those that you looked down through the square and it would then show you the picture out the front. And we're talking, it was an old-fashioned camera. Probably my grandma's gave it to me. My mom's grandma, my mom's mom. I'm going to have to ask her about that because she's still alive. She's 98 and a half years old, almost 99. But I'm going to have to ask her if she remembers. She's got a couple memory challenges, but I'm going to have to ask her if she's the one that gave me that camera. But somebody, I think Grandma, gave me this old-fashioned camera. I probably found it in her attic. And it allowed me to focus. I could look at things and they were sharp and crisp and came into focus. Now, what I should have known at the time was that I had really crappy vision. I'm the one that uses the magnifying glass for everything now. But even back then, I had really bad vision. I couldn't see the chalkboard. I couldn't even read stuff close to me that well. So, unless it was like right in front of my face. So we should have known that I couldn't see. But I didn't know that at the time. But looking through the camera allowed me to focus. It also, I'm going to tell you right now, both my kids are ADHD, but they didn't diagnose people with, attention deficit disorder back in the time that I was in grade school. We're talking a long, long time ago now. And, over 50 years. Wow, over 50 years ago, I was in first grade. But they didn't know anything about learning disabilities or challenges or learning differences. Look, they didn't even know to test my eyes to see if I couldn't see. But I found that in third grade, I got moved up to the first reading group. Number one, I didn't have my crappy teacher from first grade, and she wasn't impacting the third grade teacher. Number two, and I only found that out later on. I didn't understand in first grade why my teacher didn't like me. I still don't understand why she didn't like me, because before then, I was a likable kid. But somehow, probably because I had a strong personality back then and a lot of self-confidence, and I don't know, I think she thought it was her job to knock that out of any of us kids that had self-confidence. And I couldn't stand her because she didn't just ridicule me, she ridiculed a lot of kids in the class and picked on them. She made one of my best friends in first grade wet her pants in class because she scared her so much. That's not the kind of person that should be teaching our youth. Anyway, hindsight's always 20/20, right? But I discovered that by focusing, I could read really, really fast. And I actually became either the first or second best reader in my third grade class because I learned that I could control my mind and I could figure this out and I could focus. And that really, I needed glasses. I had bad eyes. I couldn't see. So between my couldn't see and my high energy ADHD, using the camera trick allowed me to focus on something, and I became an awesome reader. I became an amazing reader. And now, even though I read with a magnifying glass and do things online with a magnifying glass, I'm actually really fast at it. I'm slow for other people, but fast for me because I believe I can do it. And that killed the false belief of I'm not good enough or I have to compare myself to others. And it actually that was a fun story to find today. And I'm sure there's a ton of stories like this in your past that you'll go back to and you'll be like, oh my God, now I know where that came from. And once we see that story and we understand it and we go back and look at it and say, okay, wow, all of a sudden it doesn't have any energy or power over us anymore. I don't have to think that I'm not good enough because in first grade, my teacher put me in the second reading group, and all the things those silly other kids thought and did that really didn't have anything to do with me. They were just excited for themselves to be in the first reading group. You know, they didn't have any impact on me on purpose. I just felt a little jealous and envious that they were in the first group, and I wondered what was wrong with me that I was in the second group. And, you know, that didn't necessarily have anything to do with anybody else. It was a status thing. But that just goes to show us as human beings how incredibly powerful we are to create stuff that will mess up our lives for years that is just not necessary. And it's just not true. But we think it's true at the time. So today, go ahead and start thinking about at least 10 false beliefs that your ideal customer or your target audience is going to have as soon as they hear about your new opportunity. Then think about the experience that they probably had or may have had that would have caused them to adopt that false belief, and what the story was based on that experience that they told themselves about it. And then what is your story? What's your epiphany story that you're going to tell them to knock that false belief out of the park once and for all? That's it. Go out, make it an awesome day. I hope my stories weren't too rambling and weird and strange for you, but I wanted to say one more thing. I actually keep an inventory. I have a whole notebook of stories as I think of them like this. So now this story will go into I call it a stories inventory. And epiphany bridges are a very big part of that. But I wanted to share that Jim Edwards recently came out with, for funnel scripts, a story prompt wizard. And it is freaking incredible. It comes up with a whole bunch of stories and prompts. And you can see I'm working on this. I'm coming up with my stories and prompts for this, for all the different types of stories, so that I can add continually to my stories inventory. Whatever you can do to prompt you and help you to create and start, even jotting down notes about these stories will be really, really powerful and helpful to you going forward as you build your expert business. That's it. Have an awesome day. I'll talk to you tomorrow.